What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Sports Card Madness. Today's going to be really cool. So, we have Morgan Fox on. He is the director and the producer of The Hobby. It is an awesome documentary. LZ and I both watched it last week, I believe. And it was really great. Just kind of showed all aspects of it from sports cards to Pokemon and everything. And we thought, like, man, we got to get this guy on. We got to talk about this movie and just what it was like making it. So, Morgan, welcome to the pod, man.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the kind words about the doc. It was truly a labor of love and had like a total dream to make a documentary. Like it was a job for me, but I am a collector. So in order to get a job, I make films and I'm a collector. And to get a job in the industry where I work and make a living, to make a film about my hobby is like the coolest thing in the world. And so certainly it was sort of a dream. And if you had told my 12-year-old self who would go down to the corner card shop that one day I'd get paid to make a sports card or trading card documentary, would never have believed it. So I'm really happy it's now out there and people are getting to watch it.
That's really cool. That's so cool. We've had a lot of people on from the industry. We've had Nat Turner on from PSA, and Rick Probstein actually just aired today from Probstein Auctions. We've had Jeff Wilson on, and we do a lot of different things, from just a regular collector, like a fan calling in for help with their collection, to, like I said, big people in the industry. So the question I had for you about this documentary, can you kind of tell us a little bit more about it and why should people watch it?
Yeah, well, we filmed this documentary from 2021 to late 2022. We filmed in 12 different states. We filmed with collectors, we filmed with investors, we filmed at auction houses, we filmed with grading companies, we filmed at card shops, we filmed at card shows. We were all over the country, coast to coast, New York, LA, Texas, Tennessee. We were in Houston, we were in Dallas, we were in Florida, Boca Raton, Florida, we were in Connecticut. I mean, we were all over the place. So we truly, that was the whole purpose, to get a little taste of everything. And I'm a collector. I'm someone who came into collecting as a youngin in the 90s and then came back into it. I sort of grew out of it like a lot of people did, but then I came back to it in like 2009, 2010 and have been into it ever since. So I'm not someone who just came into it during the pandemic. I'm not some new person who, was flipping and decided to make a documentary about that kind of thing. Like I truly love the hobby. I have a PC that it's massive for me. It's massive enough that, my partner probably is very annoyed by it. It's like many, I had to deal with that situation. But I am someone who cares about it. And so I feel like this is a love letter, but we also try to, it's a documentary. So we tried to give a little bit of a reality check at times and kind of talk about the craziness of the COVID spike and kind of the dangers that went in there, and also just the dangers in getting into a hot market and how that can be risky, and or how true collectors maybe are priced out of that. But I truly think it gives a little bit of something for everyone if you like collecting in general. I hope that is the takeaway. There's no real hot takes in this movie. It's not a big opinionated movie. We do interview a handful of somewhat controversial people, but not really. So I think it was cool for me as a collector to go behind the scenes at a lot of these places that I'm familiar with. I spent some time with Rick Probstein, at his headquarters in New Jersey. It was really cool, and unfortunately, we only had a brief amount of time for him. For example, he like did us a favor and came out after he had already left work. He like met us back up there one evening, and we had like an hour and a half before the end of our like work day because we had a crew with us. And I was just like, I could spend 5 days with this guy
Hmm.
as a fly on the wall because of how interesting it was to see behind the scenes of Rick Probstein. And I didn't know what to expect. Same thing with like SGC down in Florida, who I know are now all over the news because of the big
Hmm.
acquisition that happened. Getting to see how cool and sort of state of the art their facilities were. And just not knowing that we were a stone throw away from backyard breaks, speak about controversial people in the hobby. We didn't know that until later. We probably would have just went over and put a camera in their space for a second to see how crazy that situation is. But it was just so much fun to get to be a fly on the wall and to see behind the scenes, and I think that should be interesting for anyone.
Sure.
It was definitely interesting. And you, to your point, if I reflect on your movie, you did a really good job of just in a short window, because you can't this thing can't go on forever. You did a really good job of just covering kind of a lot of bases, a lot of coverage, and you did it stylistically. I loved the style of this movie. It felt like really, really professional. And I know you always want to put out some professional product, but to me, it felt like really good quality. So
Thank you.
kudos to you. It just after about 10 minutes of watching it, I'm like, wow, this was produced and directed like really, really well. I'd like to get into just your background a little bit before we get back to the movie. And like, this isn't your first rodeo. You've directed, produced in the past. Um, and I just did a little bit of homework on you. You've won some different awards and you have some accolades, which is great. What would you say, like, is the like your genre of documentaries? What do you enjoy doing? Like, just give us a little bit of history on your background as well. I think it'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and I started truly as like a DIY filmmaker right when digital filmmaking sort of democratized, film and independent film in specific. And so when I was 20, from the age of 21 to 23, I made my first feature length film in Memphis, Tennessee. It took me like 2 years to make, and that was kind of the beginning of my career. If you really want to date myself, when we finished that film, I had no expectations for it other than screening in Memphis in my hometown at the film festival there. But it ended up screening all over the world, and we got a distribution deal with Blockbuster. Like Blockbuster put us in 1,500 stores, like almost all their stores around the country. And so Blockbuster, that dates me.
Yes.
And the fact that there was that many stores, because they slowly and quickly declined, obviously. And so I started out that way, and that was in 2003 when my first film premiered. And so, you know, 20 years now, I've been making movies ever since. I mean, that is how I make a living. And so that is between writing and directing my own stuff, because I didn't start with documentaries. I sort of fell into documentaries over time. But I've always made pretty independent films in terms of what I write and direct, or direct a documentary, or I write scripts and direct those as well. But I've made like 5 to 6, I'm losing count now, I think maybe 6 feature-length films. I also made like an 8-episode TV show for a streaming service. I've made short films and that kind of thing. But also in between those gigs, I act as an AD, which is an assistant director, which is not an assistant to the director. The assistant director on film sets is the one who like runs all the technical aspects. It's like the most psychotic job on a film set, and they're the one who actually often yells action and cut, and it's like just a crazy job. But I do for like high profile clients like Nike and ESPN and HBO and major both cinematic stuff, but also just like one-off commercials, Home Depot, random stuff. And so I've been around that industry for a long time. And I got really lucky with this film because I was co-producing another documentary that we were also traveling around the country with, and we ended up in LA at the end of it. And one of the companies that was a part of that production was XTR, and they're this hot new documentary company in LA, a studio who has like at that time had like 15 new films they had put into production, and documentaries specifically. And we were filming an interview at their location, at their studio that day in LA. And the director of that movie that I was co-producing had heard me talk about trading cards, and he said, hey, they have a card documentary ready to go. They need a director. I think you should direct it. You're a director. I appreciate you co-producing this, but I know that you're a director and you know about cards. That's like a match made in heaven. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I would love that opportunity. He was like, all right, well, follow me. He literally it's such an LA story. He walked me into a meeting with the head of that studio, and he sat down, and they were sort of talking to him about maybe directing at the time. And so they were like walking me, introduced me, and they were talking to him, but he was like, hey guys, I think this is your director. And then I had to talk and like with 0 minutes notice, basically give a pitch really quickly of what my version of a trading card documentary would be. And luckily, because I have the background of caring and about trading cards and understand the history, I was able to, make a pitch that was in line enough with what they wanted. I had to continue to pitch it. I had to put together official pitch document, deck as they call it out there, and then I got to bring on like the crew that I love and work with. So my producer Ted Speaker has produced lots of major films. They won giant awards. They played at Sundance and all these, on Netflix and all that kind of stuff. Him, and then we got to assemble a crew under that of people that we have worked with over time and that we know are professional, and that people that make. So I didn't come into this as a collector who wanted to make a documentary and had to learn on the fly, nor did I come in as a director who wanted to learn about trading cards and didn't know anything about them. So it was, again, a truly sort of like lucky moment for me, right place, right time, to be walked into a meeting at this place that we happened to be at, where there was a trading card documentary that literally, I mean, we filmed after that meeting. I think within like 3 weeks, we were filming already. So it was like, if it wasn't me in that moment, they would have gotten somebody else, and who knows how it would have turned out. But so
That's
a long journey there, but I feel it's somewhat serendipitous.
Yeah, thank you for the background. It becomes even clearer why this was such a quality film. You assembled like an all-star group of people, including yourself. Like you've been doing this for 20 years. So that's great. That's really, really, really interesting. I don't know if this is like too long of a question, but can you share with us your pitch? Like the 1 minute pitch, like you had to be walked into that room and on the spot, like what did you say?
Well, so at the time, I was listening a lot to another podcast, that has a similar name as you all, the Sports Cards Nonsense. I had been listening to them since the sort of like 2021, early 21. And unbeknownst to me, at that time when I started listening to them, they had a Memphis connection because someone from Memphis is the one who already had a show on the Ringer, and I knew that guy because he was in sports there, and I had done a lot of work with the Grizzlies and that kind of thing. So I knew him, and he's the one who got them connected to the Ringer, and that's in the movie, Chris Vernon. And so that was my initial. I just went to that because I was listening to that at that time, twice a week, pretty regularly. And so I said, I would use as a framing device these guys, Mike and Jesse with Sports Cars Nonsense, to sort of tell a narrative framing device of the movie. It's a perfect opportunity. It's a podcast. We can kind of set up and film and kind of control that a little bit because there's a lot of unknown in documentary. And then I said we would go to all of the aspects of how the hobby has changed since the 90s, but I also want to look back at that space. So it wouldn't be truly telling a history where we start at the beginning. It would kind of be starting in the present and then dip backwards and use this framing device. At the time, I wanted to do a little bit more than we could in terms of like taking some people to these other locations. Maybe Mike with Sports Cars Nonsense would come with us and sort of help tell that story. You kind of want to, as a documentary filmmaker, your dream is to be able to truly tell the story through what we call like verite, so where we're watching it unfold as opposed to relying on talking heads, which we do to a degree. Obviously, still have to do a lot of that in this movie, but it was really just that. Like I want to talk about the changes because so many, I think, people started in the 90s and got out of it when in that sort of golden era, and talk about the ways that it's updated. And the way that we would do that is by going to these different aspects of the hobby, and the whole sort of fanatics angle that is in the movie is something that evolved over time because when I pitched this, that wasn't really happening in that way. That was so new in terms of them buying pops and coming into the space. That all happened as we were filming, so that became a sort of narrative. That's also the challenge with documentaries. Like, where is the narrative? It's not just like a survey of all the things happening. You need to find some kind of story that's unfolding. So that was a challenge. And that was sort of a device there as well that we sort of saw that unfold.
Okay. All right. Again, a lot of coverage in this film. How did you come up with like, all right, I want to talk to, these types of people, these players in the hobby? if you could just walk through that, like that probably is for any film, right? Especially a documentary. Like, how did you sit down and say, SGC, I want to get a Pokemon person. I want to, this and that and this and that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because XDR had, what they do as a studio, especially then, they had done some pre-interview. Like they had already, their development team had reached out to some people. They had done their research, and they supplied me with some Zoom interviews that they had done, pre-interviews, not stuff that we used in the movie at all, but it's stuff that they had like done on background, like research. So they, Super Duper Danny was someone they had already talked to. Danny is the in the Pokemon space. Influencer is a word that Danny would probably cringe at, but they are someone who is present and does card breaks and appears at shows and that kind of thing. And even Gary King Pokemon was also someone they had already identified. But the people in the sports card space of it all were mostly people that I just were aware of to some degree. I mean, we did some reach outs to people who didn't end up in the movie, but that I talked to. Some people we filmed that didn't end up in it, not because anything went wrong, but as you say, we talked to a lot of people. There's a lot of subjects, and at a certain point, we had to narrow the focus a little bit because it was too crowded. Like we went to two separate graders, and at some point, it was like, do we need two separate graders? We kind of just need a grader to tell the story of grading. We filmed at some additional breakers that was like it's just like too much breaking, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I think it was just we needed to tell a little bit of each aspect of the story. So that's how, I mean, one could argue that we went to like one too many auction houses, but for example, by the time we filmed at Probstein, he was the last auction house I believe that we filmed with. And he was so interesting that I just couldn't cut, like it was impossible to cut that guy. And he was pulling out Babe Ruth rookie cards. I was just like, like what, and,
here's a $3 million card. Check it out.
Sure. Yeah, here's 31 Michael Jordan rookie PSA 10s.
Each of them's worth a couple $100,000.
Yeah, we knew about his Jordans. That was like when I did my pre-interview with him, he was like, what do you need to know about me? I owned, at the time, it was only 15 Jordans, such an underachievement to his current collection of 30 something. But he was like, I'm the guy who's got 15 PSA 10 Jordan rookies. What else do you want to know about me? Like I got the largest eBay, whatever. I'm the McDonald's of eBay sellers or whatever, he says. And so I talked to so many people, all the people that we filmed, we didn't just like cold show up or whatever. It was like each of them I had some kind of previous phone call with and discuss what they were willing to show us. We wanted to go inside. We initially thought we could film inside the vaults at PWCC, but of course they were quickly like, no, like insurance would never let us like allow cameras inside there. And I was like, are you sure though? Even graders, I mean, even SGC was really hesitant to, I think they had to meet us and really trust us to allow us to let us see some of the stuff that we ended up seeing on camera. Because, everyone wants to protect, they don't know what your motives are. And so that was part of that whittling down was, figuring out who was the most interesting, who would be good on camera, who does appear on camera regularly, because some people sound great, but then you go film them and they freeze up. You never know. And then you just go film, Documentaries are made two different ways. One way you go and you film, you spend a couple days with each person, you edit what you could make out of it. Another way you go film and you start to edit and you see who's the most interesting, and then you go spend a much more time with them. We didn't have the luxury of that because initially they wanted this film turned around really quick. Of course, it actually took way longer. And in retrospect, like part of me wishes we could have done that way, where we sort of did a survey of film like a day with everybody. And then we came back and we had 2 more weeks of filming that, in the budget, where we could then spend a week with this person, a half week with this person, a half week, and really dig into the day-to-day. But, I think we got enough with each person. And then I will say another aspect that I think really gives the film credibility is the outsider of it all, Paul Sullivan, who wrote for the New York Times, and his just ability to sort of give someone who's not a collector, but has written about it and who is very smart about wealth and money markets and this kind of thing. And, he was the only person in the film when we asked the question of like, hey, is this about to crash or the market's about to, he was the only person who was like, hey, I wouldn't get into this right now. I'd give it a couple of years. And, you know, from the time that we interviewed him, it's been about 2 years. And I would say this is about the time, if you want to spend, if you have a bunch of money to spend, this is about the time to get back in now. But over the last 2 years, you could have lost a lot of money, right? So he was the one person that we were all like, and we weren't listening to him either, to be clear. As we were filming, we were buying, and I've continued to buy, and we're all like, damn it. We interviewed him and we didn't listen to him. So
yeah, that was
funny.
great. I agree. That was really smart of you to have him on. It just gave a totally different perspective. We actually, in a previous episode, had a financial advisor come on and talk about this with us.
smart.
So it was
how much you should spend, how it's
Mhm.
different than stocks and bonds, timing, all that stuff. It was probably pretty eye-opening.
Mhm.
So Morgan, I had another question about making the film. So do you feel like you missed anyone, or was there anyone that you wish you could have had on but didn't have access to, or something like that?
That's a great question. Not really. Yeah, I mean, so we felt, you notice in the film, there's all these like light box, these sort of, we filmed some cards like they were fine art. And the one card we didn't get to was the Honus Wagner. I just wish we could have had that Honus Wagner in our studio that we brought around with us, this portable studio where we filmed the cards. Anyone we filmed with that owned cards, we'd be like, hey, we also need an hour just to film all your cards because we want to constantly be going back to this in the shot. Like technically, these are the stars of the movie, right? And we never got that, which was a disappointment. And then if we didn't have time with Rick Probstein to also do that with his cards because he had some of the most interesting. Not only the Babe Ruth, he had this. I'm a big non-sports collector at this point in my collecting journey, and he had some non-sports stuff that I was like, oh my god. He had like the Bart Simpson, Matt Groening autograph card that came out in the Skybox set that sells for like $15,000, and I was like, we didn't get that. I would have loved that, for example.
Wow.
So, you know, so it was more about missing certain cards. Like, I don't think, you know, sure, could we, like, if PSA would have let us film inside and see all their grading, because SGC has let, I think, one other person before film a little behind the scenes with them. But I think we're the first people to do it, like in terms of a you know, certainly, you know, like a documentary of this size. But like PSA has traditionally been so tight-lipped about it, and my early talks with them, because I did have conversations with their like head of PR, and my thing was like, look, we'll be the exclusive look, and we're happy to sort of sign a thing that says we won't use what you don't want us to, or whatever. And they just ultimately weren't interested, or you know, at that time, which is fine. But you know, that would have been nice because it would have been the exclusive look behind the scenes at PSA, which everyone has an opinion about what goes on with their grades, right?
Yeah.
And then I will say the only other thing was the two things. I wanted to see if we had more time, if we had done it differently, you know, during the middle of us filming with Heritage Auctions, between the time of us filming there and then the film being done, that Mickey Mantle card broke the record at 12.6 million, whatever the exact number was. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, what an opportunity it would have been to be able to film with them when that card arrived, to then track the auction to the record. I know it's like all online now, but to be behind the scenes of like, you know, to check in and out with them every couple of days, to be able to be like, oh God, now it's past this now, now it's past this amount. And then when that final sale comes through, it just would have been really a cool, that would have, to me, if I could totally change it, that would have been like the thing we tracked throughout the whole movie. It's like this record-setting auction. That's a really great narrative framing device that would have been nice. But I think that's it. There was one other thing, maybe I'll think about it in a second, but it just escaped my brain for the moment.
Yeah, so those are more probably like wishful thinking that you wish you were able to get them in. What about just like obstacles or walls that you hit? Like, this is off limits. Well, you did mention like PSA not letting you in some of the vaults, but I'm just wondering about just other obstacles. Maybe it's even just trying to get a certain person on and it just you got denied, or just anything, any walls, barriers that you kind of were hitting. Just curious with filming.
Well,
this.
I'm not. That's what's going to get me in trouble. I'm not going to talk about that again.
Okay.
I mean, it's not in trouble, not actual trouble, but just some person has their version of the story, which anyways, I'm gonna just stop.
Okay.
So
All good.
that, but I will say, even then, like, it's not even someone that I felt like we needed. It was just like
Okay.
an early. It was like an early when I was casting a wide net.
Mhm.
It did not work out with someone. That's the quick version of that.
Okay.
And so I don't know. I mean, the other obstacle is just like, documentaries don't have giant budgets. This is one of the bigger budgets that I've ever worked with. But I would have loved to have had, again, like 3 more weeks of film. And we essentially filmed this in about 2.5 weeks combined. No, I guess it was more than that. It's closer to like maybe 3.5 weeks combined. I would love to have had 2 more weeks where we could have continued, because the timeline kept extending to when it would get released. I'm like, well, I would have loved to have had, like, oh, let's go film more updates. Okay, so much has changed. Let's go film this update. Instead of having to put those things in the cards at the end of the film that update, like, kind of like, here's where this person's at, or here's what's happened here.
Oh
I would
yeah.
have loved to have continued to film those things. So it's just money, but that's every movie I've ever worked on, or that anyone's worked on. They're always like, especially documentaries, because of how timely they can be. It's like, if the interesting things happen after you're done filming, it's such a shame. And you're like,
Mm.
you never want to stop,
Yeah.
filming.
That's my
Yeah.
favorite part of a
So,
documentary. When I watch it, my favorite part is that last
uh,
2-3 minutes where it's like,
How did
where
they
are
end
they
up?
now? You know,
yeah.
I love that
And
part.
Yeah.
and there will always be that, but as a filmmaker, you always want to show the
Mm.
thing,
Mhm.
and then
Sure.
you could still have some updates at the end.
Yeah.
But, like, man, I would have loved to have continued. I mean, the things that were happening with Fanatics after we were filming, say, with Josh Luber, who's no longer there anymore, I would
Mhm.
love to, like, go do one more interview with Josh and see what's, like, okay, what happened there, and
He
would
was
he have
so
talked about
cool.
it?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, his collection and everything that was going on there was pretty amazing. And so, there's just that
Yeah.
aspect. It's just money, because
Well,
we're flying across the country, and
Sure.
we're having to stay in hotels,
Hmm.
and then the crew have their day rates, so it's expensive to make these movies.
so hopefully this isn't a spoiler, but kind of towards the end, you had Josh from Fanatics, and there was a point where even Peyton Manning was in some scenes. Did you try to get Peyton Manning on camera, like interview him or talk
I
to him or
I
other
think
athletes?
we may have reached out. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
early on, we definitely were interested in getting some athletes, but
Mm.
again, like, a big part of what was happening at first is that we had this really tight timeline, and it was during the height of the NBA season in our initial timeline. And so there was, like, no chance. Like, we wanted to film Giannis, because one of the other things we filmed was with the Giannis, like, his rookie RPA logo man. And we had a whole bit with that we wanted to film with Giannis to talk about as an athlete, because he also collects, right? And so we wanted to, like, incorporate him, but it was just like the timing did not work. And but yeah, we reached out to Mark Cuban. So there are some random people that we just in the early stages that didn't work. And then by the time, like, we realized the timeline was extending and we had a few days left in the budget, we wanted to update with our main characters at that point, not go film new people, because then it just becomes sort of, how many people are you going to be able to put in the doc?
Right.
Mhm.
So Morgan, you've been in the hobby for a long time. Larry and LZ and I, we obviously did in the 80s and got kind of rejuvenized by COVID and everything. You've kind of been in it longer. Did your opinion of the hobby change at all after making this film, or did it not?
No, I mean, it was like a kid in a candy shop. I mean, really, like, I will say, I think it made me more active. Good. Is that a good thing or bad thing? I don't know. But so my opinion didn't change in the sense that, like, I suddenly was like, oh, I'm seeing stuff that makes me realize that this is shady or something. It was nothing like that. I think, if anything, I just, like, now I can go to card shows where there's at least, even in Chicago, people that, like Sharon and Siobhan with Black Shaded Wolf, who I filmed in New York. They're female-owned card company there, and they're
Mhm.
investors. They are always at the Chicago show. They travel because Sharon is constantly traveling to shows all over the country. Like that's what she does. And so now I get to go hang out with them, and I've made deals with them. I've, like, done
Here we
some
go.
trades, and, like, So it's just
That's
nice to see
cool.
friendly faces. I feel more a part of the hobby in a way that is, I mean, I think that's when it can really change for you because it can be an isolating space. And if you don't know other collectors, you may have the people in your personal life, your wife or husband or whomever may, friends may not give a damn about your collection. And like, what are you going to bring out your cards and start showing to people who don't care? Like real soon you see their eyes glaze over. They may be like, oh, the one card, but you bring out more and they're just like, okay, like we don't care.
Yeah.
But once you know other collectors and there's a card show in town, a big one, you go and you see other, and there's spaces that you can stop and have long conversation with. That's just really cool when you really care about collecting.
That
So
is
that's been
awesome.
really nice. Yeah, I enjoy that, and interacting with people on social media who we filmed with and met along the way has been a really special thing that makes me love the hobby even more. So
So it
that's the only thing
sounds
that's changed.
like at least your eyes have been open to a broader community, right? It sounds like your community has gotten bigger since then,
That's
and you're
right.
experiencing it in a different way. So that certainly not necessarily change your opinion, but certainly grew, and you're fostering it more now. That's great.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's significant because there is a
Mm.
version of this where like I made the film and I'm burnt out and I don't want to touch cards ever again, right? Or something like that. So there is that. And instead I'm like buying, like I have a few cards here. I'm like, oh, can you
Oh,
see it
Oh,
there?
Heck
yep.
Aaron,
Hey,
SGC7. Very
Yeah,
nice.
56. So instead I'm like, starting new projects for myself where I'm consolidating cards into larger vintage cards or something like that.
Ooh.
Or buying weirds like Harry Potter autographed Harry Potter cards, or like movies I loved as a kid, like Gremlins. I've been buying Gremlins cards autographed by the director, like things that like I just think are
yes.
really cool. Or I'm consolidating stuff, or buying stuff that when I was a kid that I traded away like an idiot. Rebuying that whatever higher PSA 10 versions of certain cards that I traded.
Hmm.
That kind of thing. So yeah, it is definitely my love has grown, and my understanding of the community of the hobby has certainly, it's opened up and broadened my view there.
Yeah, for LZ and I, we got back in. I couldn't believe how wild it was, like the Wild West, like in the 80s, it was so boring, you're just buying sets and like going to the, corner store, grabbing some cards. It wasn't like a ton of inserts or gnarly things. Now it's like, my goodness, you have whatnot, you have breaks, you have just like characters and influencers, and it's just bananas. How do you, since you're probably about our age, how do you feel about like the direction of the hobby now or where it is now? Like, does it overwhelm you, or is it just kind of like, oh, this is cool?
I think it's really cool. I mean, I every time I see an ad, some people love to like whenever Tops, Fanatics Tops puts out some new ad on, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. A lot of people love to get in the comments and trash it or like talk about this or that and
Hmm.
quality control. Like to me, I get excited whenever I see that because if that's a company that is investing in the future to theoretically grow the hobby in ways that would bring more people into it, which to me, if you look at this is not a lot of people may think of, hobbies like the Beanie Baby craze, something that was like a blip that came and went. Like this is a over 100-year-old hobby that when I see companies investing and the growth that's happening, um, of course, with growth, there's going to be people that spoil it or shady things that happen. Um, but when you have people sort of debating and this discourse online, that means it's big enough for those debates to exist. And to me, that just means growth and longevity. And I just want to see it continue selfishly because I have enough cards that if they're worthless one day, that's going to suck. But at the same time, I love them. And, you know, theoretically, even if they're worthless, they're things that I love and care about. But we all, I think, would enjoy that our PCs are worth something in the future and can be passed down as something that attain value beyond just what the love for them is. It is helpful, if you've invested X amount of money into them over time. And so I just look at it as all the growth and all the different areas as expansion and bringing people in. I don't get involved in breaks a lot. I occasionally am one of these people on a Friday night if it's like a night just chilling at home and I'm not doing that much, I might put on a break, one of the crazy breaks that are like high dollar ones, and just put it in my like Apple AirPods while I'm watching sports or something and just listen. It maybe just to see what's coming out of the new product, but also just to hear the insanity. I would never throw the kind of money into those breaks that people throw. I'm just like, how are people paying $800 a spot and this breaker is like cussing them out for not paying more? Like, I don't understand that aspect, and I don't know where these people get their damn money to like get involved in that way. And I do like worry about that side of things, but also, I guess, to like sum up my answer is to say that I think there is so many people in the hobby now that those kind of like avenues and alleyways and neighborhoods can exist that I don't even have to participate in. And if those go away, it's not like if breaks went away, things would shift in a different way. And maybe that means that the companies would just print less because not as much product is constantly psychotically flowing through these breaker channels. And therefore there's more at card shops and card show, whatever. And so I just feel that the growth is good and not a bad thing. Yes, the overprinting is real. Even with serial numbers and that sort of control, it's still like, well, how many out of 25s are there? How many one of ones are there? At some point, it's getting similar to how it was in the 80s and 90s, but there's still a little bit more of a reins on it that did not exist there, So whatever. I'm excited when I see that growth until it proves to me otherwise, when I realize it's gone really bad, but who knows? I mean, what are y'all's opinions about that? Like, do y'all feel like?
Yes.
Yeah,
you're speaking our language with the one of ones and the pops of 25. Like, we talk a lot about this, Morgan, about how many one of ones are there?
Yeah.
How many 50 are there? So
yeah, it's more one of ones than Bill Russell autograph a rookie. It's when you have 2,000 one of ones, it's not really a one of one.
No.
But it's I don't want to, poop on, everybody, what they like to do and the breaking and everything like that. It's fun. And I get it and everything, but I do think there will be some questions in 30 years about all of our collective behavior with different cards and variations and things like that. And there's certain things that won't be questioned as much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that is.
No, go ahead, Morgan. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that is why I love NBA. I mean, I watch NBA, in terms of sports way more than anything. And I don't buy any modern. I mean, occasionally and very occasionally, if I'm at Target, I might buy like a blaster or something that I'm just like, why not? I know that I'm just throwing away $30 or whatever it is for some blaster, and it's not going to be card. It's like, what can you even do with those cards? Half the time they just end up in a stack in a shoebox, and I never look at them again. This is why I don't really buy them anymore. And it's why I'm mostly focusing on weird stuff, from the early 2000s, like movie stuff, because I'm in that world, or vintage stuff, because even though there is a ton of vintage stuff, and yes, maybe those prices won't go up because they are sort of leveling out from a peak. At the very least, I know how many theoretically there are, right? And there's theoretically not going to be more, because I feel like at this point, almost all of them seem to have been graded. I am always surprised looking at like Heritage Auctions Instagram feed, where I'm like, another stack of like 1956 cards. Like, who?
Right.
Like, what? Like, can y'all stop? Like, just chill out. I want to protect my pop counts. It is. I don't know. Obviously, there is money to be made in modern cards. A lot of those cards still go for a lot of money. I just don't have the kind of money to be like, I want safer plays with money, hard-earned money, than like to get into breaks or to buy boxes or cases of modern cards that who knows how many are being made, and like, are there redemptions? The only cases I bought ever, I am like not open. I'm holding those for a long time, and but it's non-sports card. Like, I bought a case of Stranger Things cards because I think that's IP that people will be aware of. The kids kind of growing up today will be aware of that in 20 years, and like that case will be worth something. And I don't think there's any redemptions in that. But like cases that have redemptions, or cases that are like modern product, that like, how many cases are there? Like, I just like, it seems really out of control. And I'm glad people are buying them. So it's real. It's not like but it's not It's not for my money.
Well, good
Yeah,
on you with the
people
cases. So I have a case problem. I'm not allowed to buy cases or packs anymore because I just end up opening
you
them.
just open them. Yeah.
So my wife's like, knock it off. You're just gonna open it. I'm
Yeah.
like, you're right.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I,
It's hard not to. I mean, I have opened some things that I bought, but not any of that stuff. Stuff that might have autographs or stuff. I'm so aware that it probably is not going to be the one I want. But I have broken open other stuff that I wouldn't. But we'll see.
so you've shared some of these the Harry Potter. Harry Potter, it's interesting that you brought up Harry Potter because Harry Potter has come up a few times recently on our show. So there might be a trend going on with Harry Potter right now.
Yeah,
Um,
I love this stuff. This is just a lower
what's
grade, a lower
okay.
character. Can you see that? Oh, it's not
It's
really. What if I put it right
let's
next
Just
to me? This
it's
is
just explain.
Filch.
Filch. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. Filch.
Yeah, so this
Nice.
is not. This is just like a lower. I don't know. It's maybe worth $150 or something. They go for a lot, especially if they're graded. Like it seems like no one even cares what the grade is. It's like
Mhm.
if it's graded, they go for like 4 times as much as the raw ones. I don't know. It's a wild. I get those alerts every morning on eBay. I think I need to like disable them. All of my better, I have like Dumbledore. I don't have like Harry and Hermione. Those are
Mm,
so much money these days that
yeah.
but I have a lot of the other ones and they're in a box that I can't find currently in the move.
Oh boy.
But I mean, no, they're around. I just haven't opened that box yet.
Yeah.
But I think that stuff is. I mean, it's like Harry Potter. I mean, that stuff is. Even as much as J.K. Rowling becomes controversial, like
Mhm.
people, it seems like cancel proof or whatever.
Collect the goats. You got to collect the goats, right?
Yeah.
The greatest of all times. Harry Potter series is probably one of the goats, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tried to
Yeah.
buy it at the National this year. Someone had a whole display case of a lot of a few autographs, but it's mostly all the memorabilia, like props, pieces of little
Mm.
props or costumes. And they probably had 150. And I tried to buy the whole case off this guy, but he was like, "You're not going to like my price." He was like, and then we realized that we were outbidding each other on eBay at the time. Like we were like constantly outbidding each other. So we tried to make a truce, like that we would identify when the other one was bidding. I made him an offer on this entire table, and he was like, "I'm not going to give you the deal that you want because I also would rather just hold these forever." So that's the thing about those when it's that type of stuff. Especially different than modern cards or really any sports cards. Like that type of stuff has a different place, I think, in
Mm-hmm.
people's, the nostalgia of it all. If you watch movies with your family or your parents or your children, and then those things, it's just a different place in people's hearts. And so I think that kind of stuff could be really interesting for
Yeah.
like actual investment potential.
I love that. There's probably a separate show just on this that I think we should do. A separate
Yeah.
episode. We might have to have Morgan back on.
I would trust me, I
Yeah.
would love it.
Yeah.
I'll bring out my other car. I
Well,
love that aspect.
this is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. What is so you mentioned Harry Potter, you've mentioned the Stranger Things box. What would you say are like your two best items that you have? Doesn't have to be the highest value, but the two that you're the most proud of.
Yeah, like stuff I would never trade or something or like
Yeah.
sell, maybe if I'm
Hmm.
thinking of it that way. I don't know. I mean, this again, I'm like have these little show and tell items. So this is an autographed Joe Dante is the director of Gremlins. And this is like a picture of Gizmo and it's autographed, but I would never like
Oh,
this
Gremlins. It's
no amount of
great.
money, would get that out of my hands. Um I Gremlins was like my favorite movie as a kid, and
Wow, really?
I love Joe Dante's movies, and so to have like and then Gizmo like as a kid I remember like also maybe like one of the first times I cried when Gizmo they had him on the dartboard and they were throwing darts at
Oh,
him or something.
Do you remember the rules?
So
What were the rules? It was don't
oh
feed them
yeah, you
after
don't
midnight.
no
don't
we
get them
can't get
wet.
water,
Don't get them wet.
sunlight is bad for them, and don't feed them after midnight. Don't feed them after midnight was the really bad
Yeah.
one. Um, but yeah, so I mean that's one of them, and then I'm trying to think. It might literally just be like my 1986, yeah, my 1986 Don Russ Jose Canseco rated rookie card, just because my father bought me that card for $100 at its peak in probably 89 or something. It was a big deal. I mean, we did not have money. I mean, we were, like I shared a room with my brother. Like it was, I think it must have been a birthday. I don't know what was going on that my dad finally, something must have been going on in life where he was like, I need to really reward Morgan. And he like took me to Nostalgia World, one of the trading card shops that also sold comics and all kind of records and stuff, and bought me that off-centered 1986 Don Russ rated rookie card of Jose Canseco, who was my my goat at that time. That was right at, he had his 40-40 like crazy record breaking performance. And so yeah, I mean, I would never get rid of it. It's not worth anything now, basically. And so it's not a PSA 10, it never will be. So it's definitely not worth anything. But that definitely holds like a nostalgic place for me and really represents that early sort of collecting energy that was happening when I was a kid.
That's great. That was a big get in 1989. Jose Canseco.
Yeah,
that was a big one.
But he lost favor with me because I think like later that year he was or maybe it was in 1990 or something. He was signing autographs. He was traveling to the shows to do autographs, and I like waited through the whole line. I was so excited because he was still my number one. Like, and we got through the line, and he like didn't even look up. Like he just signed, like didn't even look up, and I was just like, what a jerk, So I was like, boo. But still that rookie
Never
card,
meet
I'll
your
never
heroes.
forget that moment. Yeah, don't meet your heroes.
Well, Morgan, other than coming back on the show to do a movie memorabilia and card episode with us, let's talk about your future projects. What's the next thing in the works for you right now? Anything?
Yeah, so right now there's nothing that's like set up ready to go. So right now I'm doing a bunch of meetings. We have like 3 different movies that are in like development phases, but I don't have something greenlit currently at the moment. We'll see. There's 2 narrative scripts that I've written, and then there's 2 documentaries. So actually 4 projects that who knows which one will go first, but hopefully one of those get greenlit soon, and we'll see.
If you had a blank check from a studio that said you can have all the time in the world, all the money in the world, what movie would you make?
Oh my gosh. Y'all should have prepped me with that question.
You can think about it. We can go to another question.
Let's go to commercial break. No, I think if all the money in the world, I don't know. I mean, the one script that I probably just spent the most time on at the current moment would be, I don't have like a dream script that I've been waiting forever to make that like I'm ready. But there's like a somewhat true story about myself and a friend of mine from high school who convinced this music producer that we were the Smashing Pumpkins. And so we sort of like came up with the story. We changed a few aspects to protect people, but also to make it more dramatic than it maybe was. Because money got involved to like develop our new record that pretty wild story. And then my friend ended up in the hospital because clearly we weren't the Smashing Pumpkins. And this music
you got to make this. This is crazy.
She sent her goons to teach my friend a lesson. And so he ended up in the hospital after a tire iron attack. And so that was fun. And I have a script that I've had some meetings on. And leading up to the pandemic, there was some like potentially promising things, and then some regime changes and stuff at different companies sort of like allowed that to fall off. And so I'm sort of excited to potentially start getting that back out there. And
wow.
I would love to be able to make that.
They're touring right now, and they've like there's been an uptick in their touring. So now might be the time to seize this. You need to seize this timing.
So yeah, give me a blank check, and I would like the cast I would give for that would be, I would have a lot of fun casting.
Yeah,
I can imagine
that situation.
Awesome. So Morgan, we got our final question. It's funny. We usually ask somebody, we call it the coffee question. Who would you sit down and get a coffee with, like a sports figure, dead or alive? But for you, I'm going to give you a choice. So you can sit down and get a coffee. You can get it with a sports figure, dead or alive, couple hours. Or it could be a director or producer or something like that. You can kind of choose.
All right. Sit down and have a coffee. This is always an interesting one because I hear this answered in a lot of different ways. And on one hand, you want to choose like the most unattainable version of that, right? Like, but then on the other hand, you realize like sitting down and having a coffee with somebody is like they have to be entertaining and interesting too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't want
Yep.
to like Stanley Kubrick is a director that like I love, but like I've never thought about like, oh, I'd love to meet him or like have coffee because he seems so intense that like what would I talk about with him? You know what I mean? Like made some of the greatest movies of all time, but like and like luckily I have actually met a lot of the people, I've met George Lucas, for example. I've been in the same room with George Lucas for many hours in a casual event that wasn't like him on stage, like in a room where I got to like talk to him. The same with Werner Herzog, who's another director. So you clearly see the direction I'm going, which is like movie people.
Yep.
So I don't. I mean, I guess I'd never had one-on-one with Werner Herzog. Are y'all familiar with Werner Herzog? Is this too obscure?
No, no, let's do
Uh,
it. What?
I'm not. Let's hear about him.
he's a German filmmaker, but is one of the most entertaining and interesting people. And I've been at talks that he's given that have been like small, like with like 20 people, for like 4 hours, and I like could have been there for 3 more days straight because of how interesting he is. His movies are not even that great, but if you listen to the commentary tracks, the way he talks about his movies with this German accent, and he has this whole like sort of almost stand-up comedy shtick about him, where he's like just like he's gotten shot in the middle of an interview before because he films in dangerous places, and he's like, ouch, and like, oh, that hurts so bad. And anyways,
Oh,
keep. And
jeez.
he's like, no, 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 don't cut the camera. Keep asking me questions. I'm not doing the accent right, but he's like literally like keeps doing the interview. He's like he films in like the craziest situation. He's had an actor put a gun to his head before, and had like an actor. Anyways, the stories that this guy has are incredible, and he has made some super important films. But he's just like, so I think it would be him. I would love to actually spend some one-on-one time and just talk to him because he's also just really inspiring about like getting to the root of why humanity is driven to make art. And
Mm,
that's something that is, I am driven to make art, make films.
Mhm.
And so that's my non-conventional answer.
cool.
If
I
it
like
had
it.
to, if it had to be in our a sports person, I don't know. Who is y'all's? Let me pit it.
All right. Yeah, no, I did Babe Ruth just because I mean obviously what he did on the field was nuts, but also he was the first sports figure that was larger than sports and kind of I just want to be like, dude, what was it like to be a millionaire in 1920? Like where did you go? Like what did you do? Where did you vacation? Just kind of like interesting questions like that. I'm a sucker for period pieces like Boardwalk Empire and stuff like that. So, just getting in somebody's head that like lived in that time would be like wild.
And
Yeah,
then for me,
absolutely.
it's Red Auerbach, Celtics coach, GM, and I chose him because he spanned over so many generations of Celtics, right? You could talk about the Bill Russells and the Bob Cousy's, and then how he even drafted Larry Bird and that whole story. And he's just a massive personality too. So for me, and I am a Celtics season ticket holder, so it's near and dear to my heart. So that's my guy.
Yeah. Um, so Morgan, if we do, I lied. We have one more question. LZ and I
Yeah, no,
talked
that's
about this.
fine. That's fine.
One more, because you're a filmmaker and LZ and I are movie buffs. Favorite movie all time? You might have told us earlier, but I'm not sure if that's your favorite movie. I'm just making sure.
What movie did I say before?
Gremlins.
Oh, yeah. This is also one of those interesting. It sort of speaks to the same question that of like, who would you have coffee with? Because I am of two brains with movies. I love entertainment, like in terms of like just like going to a movie and it's almost like a roller coaster. Like I just have fun, shut my critical brain off. Like Gremlins Gremlins is actually good, but like there are plenty of movies like of that era that I think are incredible that like other people like critically like have poor critical scores. And I'm like, I don't like take the critical out of this. To me, it's fun. Like, and I can go watch Marvel movies and have an incredible time. I'm not one of these people that even likes to like after a movie talk about them for a long time. And so on one hand, Gremlins, yes. On another hand, there's like literally like the most obscure Russian movie called Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky, who I think is like the greatest movie of all time.
Wow.
But for some people, it will be unwatchable because it's 3.5 hours and it's considered one of the slowest movies ever.
It's Friday night. I might have to cue something up, man. I'm a sucker for this. Like Citizen Kane's my jam. That's like my favorite movie, like deep.
And it's incredible.
But again, yeah, it's not a popcorn flick I'm going to watch with my son, right? That's like a whole different story. That's really cool. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah,
I also love like I'm just like I can't say favorites. It's impossible for me. Like Lean on Me was one of the movies for whatever reason. Like me and my brother probably watched 30 times for some reason. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Morgan Freeman, turning a school around, just like
Definitely.
incredible characters in that movie. I mean, I watched that movie. I can quote that movie like endlessly. Also, Pulp Fiction. Like I saw that at a pivotal time when I was deciding. I was writing, but not for film in high school. And like, that was one of the first times I was like, this is really cool. Like, this is like the coolest movie I've ever seen. And like, I kind of want to make movies. Like, and so Pulp Fiction also, I've seen Pulp Fiction more than any movie for sure. So that has to be in the conversation too.
What is in that case? What is in that case? Oh, great movie.
We know, right? Don't you know what's in the case?
I don't, there's theories, there's Reddit, threads about it. What do you think? What's in the case? I
mean, it's his soul.
Okay. That's why the combo was 666, right?
He sold his soul to the devil.
All right.
And then he has the I'm suddenly
the scar on the back of
yeah, he has that's where apparently the soul can be extracted from the body. So yes, these are also I haven't had coffee with anyone. Quentin Tarantino. That's my answer. That's my official answer.
That's a really, really
good one.
Yeah.
Because I could ask questions like that. He's also just entertaining. Also, I don't think I would have to say a word. He would just talk the entire time because he likes to talk way more than I do. And I love to just, if someone is smart or interesting, I like to just shut up and like let them talk unless I am required to. I can talk in front of an audience to 1,000 people with no issue. But like if I'm at a party or within a room, I am very like quiet and like to be observant. So I would happy to be in a coffee shop and just let Quentin Tarantino talk to me for 2 hours.
Excellent. All right, we have kept you long enough, I think. So, Morgan, where can people find you and follow you, and also where can people check out your movie? Like, how can they watch it?
Yeah, so I'm Morgan Jon Fox. It's my name on all social media. No H in John, so just Jon, Morgan Jon Fox. And then the movie is available in all sort of TVOD is what they call it, so on-demand platforms. On Amazon, I think on Amazon it's a little tricky. You have to go to your web browser and then add it to your list or rent it, and then it'll show up in the app on your streaming, like on your streaming enabled TV. It's like I don't know why it's like that, but on Apple, if you have Apple TV, you can go to their store on Apple TV and rent or download it or purchase it. Same with Google Play. Okay. And then it'll be available at some point on Documentary Plus, which is a company that's affiliated with XDR that was that a lot of folks, really great high-profile folks, have been involved with curating. That have been involved with Sundance and other things. It's a free streaming service. You don't have to pay to have a monthly subscription. I think it's ad-supported. So it'll at some point be available there, and it'll live there. But also, if I understand correctly, in May you can watch it on flights. If you're on a flight, you can just pop on the hobby and watch it while you're traveling coast to coast.
Cool.
Well, when everybody's flying to the national, they got to be watching the hobby then.
Oh, right. Pre-game. Yeah. Get the pre-game on the flight. I love it. Morgan, thank you so much. This is a cool conversation. I mean, it kind of went everywhere. We started with the hobby, then we got into Gremlins, and then somehow we ended up with coffee with Quentin Tarantino. So very, very cool.
I love it.
Yeah. Thanks again. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Morgan.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, y'all. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate y'all having me on. Great conversation. And I'll totally take you up on the offer to come back and talk about weird non-sports cards because
Let's
I'm really into it.
let's do it.
Perfect.
Thanks again.